While and for loops have long been the workhorses for iteration in programming. Later, you will learn about arrays and array iteration methods as well, but first, let's get acquainted with these two fundamental concepts, the while and for loops. We'll begin with the while loop, of which there are two variants, the while and the do while. The while loop starts with the while keyword, then an expression that acts as a condition for whether or not the loop continues. Then again, you will have curly braces that define a code block. You will not use a semicolon after the ending curly brace for a while block. That's it, very simple, but very powerful. You can now cause your computer to repeat a task over and over and over again as many times as you want. You have to be very careful with this power because you don't want to accidentally put your computer in an infinite loop. That will, at minimum, cause an error and could even cause your browser or computer to crash. So something you must do is to make sure to write a way for the condition to change while inside the while block so that it can eventually be evaluated as falsy so that the while loop will stop. So initially you want the condition to be true so that you can enter the while block, but then eventually it's going to have to be falsy, so that it can exit the while block. Let's go to the developer console and look at an example. As always, whenever I am demonstrating something in the developer console, make sure that you are also trying it yourself in your own console. I'm going to declare a variable I and initialize it to 0. Now the name of this variable doesn't have to be I, but I is very commonly used in programming to mean iterator. Then I'll write a while loop and give it the condition while I is less than 10. Then inside the while block, I will console log the current value of I. Then I will increment I. That's the important part here. I'm changing the value of I so that it will eventually not be less than 10. If we run this code, then you can see that the while loop executed 10 times, starting with 0 through 9. Let's trace the logic. The first time it checked if I is less than 10, and I is 0 at this point, so it goes inside this block. It logs the value of I, which is 0. Then it adds 1 to I, so now I is 1. It gets to the end of the while block and loops back to the top. Every time it loops, it's called an iteration. So now we're on the second iteration. And I equals 1 at this point, so I is still less than 10, so again we go inside this block. Again, we console log the value of the iterator. Then we add 1 once again, so now the iterator's value is 2. And we loop back to the top. We do it again until we get to the point where I is 9. Then it gets 1 added to it, and now I is 10. Then we go back to the top of the while loop and check again. Is I less than 10? This time, no, it's not. So now we're out of the while loop. By the way, don't be concerned about this extra 9 at the end. That's just the developer console giving you the final value of I. That wouldn't happen if you ran this outside of the console. I mentioned that there is another variation to a while loop, and it's called a do while loop. Let's take a look. A do while loop will look like this. In this case, we do use a semicolon at the end of the statement since we're not ending with a curly brace. The difference here is that the code inside the do while block will always execute at least once, while the code inside a while block may never execute. Let's try this in the console. We'll set I equals 0. Again, we will console log the value of the iterator, then increment it by 1. And we'll have this condition here, while both I is greater than 0 and I is less than 10. So since I equals 0, this condition is false, but because it's the do while loop, everything in this code block gets executed once, no matter what, before it reaches the test condition. And by the time it's reached here, I is no longer 0, it's 1, so it keeps going until I is 10. If we did this as a while loop, nothing happens because we never enter the loop since this condition gets evaluated first.